This is the first ward school. The school was built in 1896, which makes it the oldest surviving school building in Wisconsin Rapids. Now, when they first originally built this school, they built the school with the idea in mind that it was going to have all of the latest and greatest that technology had to offer. So this was the first school in Rapids that had things like electricity, indoor plumbing, had the big coal furnaces for heat in the wintertime. And when you actually go in and read the history about the opening of the school, they actually talk a lot about the blinds because of how teachers now possess the ability to adjust sunlight out of the students' eyes. Pretty big stuff back then, right? Pretty cool. I mean, we don't even think about things like that anymore. That was the news, you know? And there's a few cool things here, like the gold frame right there and the two that are out there. Those are actually pieces of the original blueprints. So that's back when everything had to be hand-drawn before computers and all that fancy stuff. A picture above the door here, that's what she looked like when they finished building her. That's when she still had the bell tower. Bell tower was lost in the 1920s. It was actually January 20th, 1920. What had happened was it was a really cold day, so the caretaker had both of the coal furnaces up and running. Luckily, the caretaker decided to walk home and have lunch that day, and when he was walking away from the building, he noticed the roof was on fire. Apparently what had happened was embers had escaped up out of the chimney from the coal furnace, set the roof on fire, and that's when the bell tower was lost. A lot of people think the dome in the back was the original dome. It is not. That was from the previous owner. His idea was to turn this into a bed and breakfast. And part of his blueprint for that was he was going to have a tower going out the top of the building where the guests could go up there and oversee the town. So his dome is a little too large. The original dome was only 6 by 6. His dome is 16 by 16. So a lot of people think that's original, but the one back there is not. Some other interesting things about the history is this is what they basically consider the second generation of schoolhouse. Originally, schoolhouses used to be one large room where they would teach multiple levels in one room. This was the next big idea, was the 4 large classrooms, and the classrooms originally had 3 large chalkboards in them. So they actually had all the way up to high school, up until about the 20s, when then it became only kindergarten through 3rd grade like it is now, to this day. Little information about myself, because a lot of people always want to ask the question, how did you come across this place, blah, blah, blah. Well, a little history about myself. I had a paranormal experience when I was 5 years old. I got to meet my great-grandfather, who died before I was born. So it left me a little, as a kid, So I really got into the paranormal even at a very young age, and was fortunate enough to start investigating when I was 12. So I've been doing this for over 30 years. And I have worked in some television, and I was working on my own show about 12 years ago. It was called Relatively Haunted. And when we finished filming season 1, we were looking for locations for season 2. That's when I had a friend who lived in the Rapids, and he contacted me, and he's like, hey, there's this old haunted school in town, you should check it out. So we did, we came here. We had activity right off the bat. The owner's sister let us into the building, and we just come into the front entryway, would have been the other side, because we couldn't use those doors at that time. And right when we got to the top of the stairs, first thing we hear is a, hello. Well, the owner's sister got upset because she thought somebody had broken in here. I guess they had problems with people breaking in and homeless and whatever. So she thought somebody was in the building. We looked through this whole place. There was nobody in here. So right off the bat, we're like, oh, I love this place. And my paranormal team, we're all family. So it's like me, my mother, my stepdad, aunts, uncles, cousins, my own daughter, called Relatively Haunted. That's what the show is about. And the family had always discussed finding an old haunted location. We needed some TLC, something that we could work together as a family and bring back to life, and this place happened to be for sale. So long story short, here we are. Some of you who are going to be new to this tonight, in my 30 plus years of investigating, I'm going to give you my opinions. You can believe whatever you want to believe. I'm not trying to change anybody's thoughts on anything. This is just my opinions and my beliefs after 30 plus years of being into this. First thing, if you want to get into ghost hunting and paranormal investigating, best thing you can do for yourself is take the Hollywood out of it. All the stuff you see on TV and horror movies and campfire stories, throw that all out. Because at the end of the day, all a ghost is the human soul. You can give it a different label if you want to, if that helps you sleep better at night or whatever, but they're just a human soul. They're not monsters, they're not out to get you or any of that kind of stuff. You gotta approach them like they're people. Talk to them like they're a real person. Respect them. You're gonna have better experiences that way if you keep that kind of a mindset. And like I always like to tell people, if you have a paranormal experience tonight, don't get scared. Change the way you think. What is actually happening is you are seeing evidence of the eternal human soul. So what does that mean? That means you have a soul. Start living your life like you do. It's that simple. I don't even like to call it ghost hunting personally. I like to call it soul searching. Because that's what we're actually doing. We're looking for a soul. I'm not actually hunting anything, you know.
Right.
And sometimes when you get into this stuff, the soul you find is your own. Plain and simple. This entranceway here was known as the girls' entrance. Because back in the day, they would actually keep the boys and girls segregated when they enter and left the building. The original design, she actually had back doors that matched the front doors. That wasn't changed until 1954. In 1954, they did a big remodel here with the purpose and the intent of adding a cafeteria. Originally, the bathrooms and the nurse's office was located in the basement. Well, that's where they were putting the cafeteria, so they changed the layout of the stairway so they could move the bathrooms in the office up into the stairway so they could make room for the cafeteria, and that's when the back doors were lost. Now, as far as like paranormal activity that you would experience in this area, the most common thing that people will experience in here is they'll see like the shadow people going back and forth through here. Now, in my honest opinion as an investigator, that's what we call a residual type kind of haunt, meaning there is no intelligence to it at all. Just like a moment in time that just keeps playing itself out over and over and over again. And what usually causes that kind of activity is in an area where the same things happen at the same times of day, which you would have had the kids entering and leaving at the same times of day, or an area that's attached to high amounts of emotion. And what's more emotional than children? So if you see that shadow activity coming through here, it's not going to acknowledge you, it's not going to change its path in or direction, it's not even going to acknowledge your existence. Okay, now I'm going to try to keep it to like one story per area to keep things moving. But my favorite story in this area was the first Christmas I ever lived here. I've got 12-foot ceilings. I was like, I'm getting a big Christmas tree, right? So I had this big tree, I had it set up right over there. And as I'm decorating the tree, I started to hear the laughter and giggling of children. And that's when it kind of dawned on me. It's like the school closed in 1977. So if there were still any kids here, they hadn't seen and or heard anything Christmas 40 going on 50 years. So with my viewpoint on ghosts, I tried to make them a part of my Christmas. So every year, there's a boy stocking and a girl stocking, so they get new toys and stuff just like everybody else, so they feel like they're a part of everything. So this would be what was the kindergarten room. Now, one thing that's cool about this building is a lot of the times we get to talk to people who used to go to school here. And they'll share with us stories of what it was like to be here back in the day. Interestingly enough, one of the most common stories I've heard from people was about the kindergarten teacher and how she used to discipline students. Remember the time period here, people. Back then, One thing that she did is she kept a roll of tape in her desk. And if you got too mouthy, she would actually rip 2 pieces of tape off that roll and put an X right over the kid's mouth. And if you extra ticked her off that day, she would lock you in the closet back here. Now what's really, really interesting was I was giving a tour to a young lady who lives in town here. She's really into all the ghost hunting shows and stuff, so she brought a voice recorder with her on the tour, hoping to capture EVP. For those of you who don't know what EVP is, it's electronical voice phenomenon. What that means is at the time when you're talking to them, you might not hear a response. When you play that recording back later, the recording is going to pick up a response. So 2 days after she got the tour, she came back here. She had her voice recorder with her, and she's like, "You gotta hear this." And she hits play. And it's the part of the tour where I was talking about how she would lock students in the closet back here. And at that moment, you hear this little boy's voice come in and say, "I didn't do it." Now what's really, really interesting is a month after that, we had a paranormal team come here to do an investigation. They had brought a teen psychic along with them. When they showed up, they hadn't had the tour or anything. They literally just got here. When the teen psychic entered this room, the first thing she did is she walked over and she opened that door. She said she didn't know why, but that door had to remain open. When she opened the door, she claimed that she could see a little boy sitting on the floor telling her over and over again, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." So I thought that was pretty interesting that somebody captured this EVP and then this person came along and basically said the exact same thing. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me. But hands down, my favorite experience in this room would be with a buddy of mine. His name is Brian Dorn. He's an author. He writes books on the paranormal. And he was getting to write a new book. And he contacts me. He's like, "Hey, can I come out to your place? Check it out. I'm writing a new book." And I'm like, "Sure, come on out. Let's see what you find." And he came out here, and me and him were investigating till about 1:30 in the morning, but unfortunately we hadn't had a single thing happen. It was so quiet in here, you probably could have heard a mouse fart. So what we did is we just took a break. We sat in those chairs out there and did nothing but listen. Well, after listening for a while, we started to hear knocks inside the kindergarten room. And Brian looks at me and goes, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "I sure did." And he's like, "Well, let's go in there." So we come into the kindergarten room, and this is what he did, and I just think this is amazing. He comes into the kindergarten room and he goes, "If there's anybody in here and you guys want to go outside and play, just knock on something and let me know." All of a sudden, we heard more knocks in the room. Brian looks at me, he's like, "Did you hear it again?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, that's weird." He's like, "Okay, well, if there's somebody locked in the closet back there, and you want to go outside and play too, that's fine. Everybody has the chance to go. All you have to do is just knock on the door, let us know, and we'll let you out." All of a sudden we heard knock, knock. So I walked over there, I opened up the door, I walked back right over to that side of the room. I'm standing next to the board over there. Brian's standing right next to me, and he goes, "Okay, if everybody's ready to go outside now, what I need everybody to do is to line up against the wall over here." And all of a sudden, we heard the sound of footsteps going across the floor right over to that wall. And the next thing Brian does is he goes, "Okay, I talked to the teachers, I talked to the principal. You guys are not going to get in trouble for this. But if everybody's ready to go outside now, what I need you to do is to turn around and knock as hard as you can on the wall behind you." And then we heard knock, knock, knock down the wall. Brian, being the gentleman that he is, he actually acted like he was getting the kids to the door, single file, actually went outside, like he was actually outside with the kids, and after about 10-15 minutes, called them all back to the door again, single file, to bring them back inside. One of the reasons why I love that story so much is A, he talked to them in a way that they would want to respond. You see too much on television, that stereotypical, "Do you know you're dead? Are you a boy? Are you a girl?" No, he talked to them in a way that they would want to respond, that they would want to engage with him. The other thing that I loved about it was that he didn't use any of equipment. Not that I'm against equipment. I use a lot of equipment myself. The biggest problem I see with a lot of teams is they come in with whatever is the latest and greatest toy that's out there right now. They sit it down and they do nothing but stare at this thing all night, waiting for it to do whatever the heck it's supposed to do. That ghost could literally walk right up to him, be doing a jig, and they would never know. You have to pay attention. You have to watch. You have to listen. Lastly, the thing I love about that story is he followed through with what he promised. There's too many times I've seen with paranormal investigators where they'll say, hey, you do this for us, we'll do this for you. This happens, and everybody loses their mind. Everybody's like, oh my God, did you see that? I gotta go outside, I gotta call the wife, I gotta have a cigarette. And then they never do what they promised to do. Why would they want to continue talking to you at that point? Little things, you gotta think of them like they're people. If you guys are all sitting around the table tonight doing your thing, make sure you pull out an extra chair so they feel like they can sit with you. Just little things like that. I heard you guys brought some toys with you tonight. One thing that'll irritate me more than anything is when I watch a television show and they're trying to interact with a child. And they'll bring like a ball or a toy truck and they'll put it down and all stand back. Could you push that ball? Could you push that truck? Think about that for a minute. You're a kid. Some guys come into your house, you don't know who they are. They're all standing around, come on in, play with the toy, it's okay. No, that's creepy. You want them to interact with you? Sit down on the floor, play with the toys yourself. Then you're more likely to have something come in and interact with you. You gotta have that kind of a mindset when you're doing this kind of thing. Now, as you go through the building, there's also a lot of cool antiques. Some are historical. For instance, like these pieces behind me right here, these were all owned by the mobster Frankie One Ear Frotto. Got a lot of cool things from him, like he was best friends with Sammy Davis Jr., so I even have like some of his personal photos of like Sammy and Frankie together. You pose for candid little shots like this. And I even have interesting things like I actually have some of the letters that Sammy Davis Jr. wrote to Frankie. So got a lot of cool little historical things throughout the building. Okay, this side, this would have been the boys' entrance on this side. Just like the other side, people will see the shadow people that go back and forth through here. Once again, that's just residual. Now, as far as like more intelligent type kind of activity, I think one of my favorite stories is I was coming through here, it was a couple of summers ago, to go down these stairs which lead down to the kitchen. And from this direction, clear as a bell, I hear somebody say my name, Justin. Now I like to tell that story because a lot of people are like, oh my God, it said your name, isn't that scary? No, actually it's not. To me, that's amazing. It shows that they're intelligent, they're aware, they know what's going on, they know who I am. So to me, that's an awesome experience. Although there was one night I was here with the local team from the Rapid Response Paranormal, and their team leader, Wayne, was sitting in that little love seat there, and I was sitting in the kindergarten room in that sofa right close to the door, when this chair in the corner over there just started creaking and cracking like somebody had just sat down in it. The first thing that I noticed going into that corner by the chair would be the stereotypical stuff. I noticed how much colder it was in that corner. Whenever I'd step into that corner, all the hair in my arms and stuff would stand up. But what was really bizarre about it is at that time I had a spirit box, the SB7, which if you're not familiar with that, it's a box that scans through radio frequency to generate voice. But what was interesting was the box was turned off. And whenever I would step into the corner with that box, you would actually get feedback through the speaker. Like you'd hear it like shh, whenever you step into the corner with it in the off position. So I thought that was really, really strange. Okay, so this would be the boys' restroom. So this would have been all original to 1954 when it was moved up here. So this would have been a back door originally, not the windows like it is today. Once again, the most common thing that people will report in the boys' rooms, especially like when they're in the stalls, is they'll say they see the shadows of like people walking through here. Once again, I just think that's the same part of that residual energy that they see going right to this, which would have been the back door exiting the building or coming in. Now, other type of activity that I've had in here is the first 3 years I lived here, I had this statue of a cat that used to sit right here. And this being one of the first rooms that I would visit in the morning, I'd come in here and I'd find that the statue would be moved. Sometimes it would just be like over here or just down on the dresser. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, what, you just don't like it? Do you want me to take it out of the room? What's going on here? Until I had an investigator friend of mine from Chicago. He came up here and he's like, oh, I know exactly what's going on. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you think? He's like, well, think about it. You're a kid and you come in here and you want to look out the back window to see out in the yard. You're about this tall, so the statue's in your way. So what are you going to do? You're going to move it out of your way so you can look out the window. And I was just like, duh, simple. You know, a lot of the times with activity, there's a very human explanation behind it. But a funny story is we had a team here at one point, and what they did is they put painter's tape around the base of the statue so they could tell if it had moved at any point. Well, about halfway through the night, they sent 2 of the girls from the team in here to check on the statue. The rest of us were all by the front door. All I know is I hear this woman screaming like she's getting murdered in here. Apparently what happened was the first girl entered the bathroom, she turned the light on, said she saw a shadow person standing right here. It scared her so bad that she screamed, turned around, ran over the poor lady behind her to get out of the building. If things scare you that bad, you probably shouldn't be doing this. And number 2, never run, because that's when people get hurt. One thing that I'm going to talk about real quick, it's not necessarily school related, but it kind of ties into what I'm trying to teach you guys here tonight. The painting down there of that lady. That actually came from one of my team's investigations. Now here's the story. There's a little lady, her husband had just recently passed, and she started having activity in her home. So she contacted us, and I went in to talk to her, doing the interview, and I'm sitting down, going through all the questions with her, and I finally get to the golden question. You know, what kind of activity happens in your home that makes you think it's haunted? Well, first she lists off the stereotypical stuff, you know, I see the shadowy like figure and it sits in his chair, and then he'll get up and go down the hallway to his bedroom. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty normal kind of stuff. And then she's like, and then when I go to the bathroom in the morning, the damn toilet seat's always up, and I always used to yell at him for that. And at this point, I'm like you, I'm trying not to laugh. I'm trying to be professional, like, okay, Ghost leaves toilet seat up. But anyways, we decided to do the investigation. When we did our investigation, we managed to capture an EVP. And all the EVP said was, I love you. Now later, when I got to play this EVP for her, she puts the headphones on and she's listening. And she's like, oh my God, that's my husband's voice. And after hearing that last I love you, the activity in her home stopped, which is a very common thing. A lot of times when a loved one passes, they like to visit people that were important to them, let them know that everything's okay, that kind of thing. Now where the picture comes into all of this was in his basement, he had a bar. That picture was behind the bar. He loved that painting so much, he referred to it as his girlfriend. So when we were leaving her house, she was like, here, take the picture. We're like, oh, no, we couldn't possibly do that. She's like, no, take the picture. But I love telling that story because I like to drive the point home that ghosts aren't monsters, they're not scary, they're very human. And that's why I like to tell those kinds of stories. The ladies' room, I will have to admit, is one of the more active rooms. Why, I have no idea, it just is. The most common thing that happens in here is throughout the day, you'll just hear the stall door shutting. There's no breezes going through here strong enough to open those doors or any of that. And a lot of the teams that have been here have been able to capture that. But this room is special to my family because this is the first room where any of us saw an apparition in the building. So it would have been back in the beginning after we gotten all the garbage taken out of the building, because there was 18 tons of garbage in the building that we had to take out before we could even begin to fix the place. So my mom and my aunt were out there just outside the girls' room and sweeping and mopping the floor out there. My mom was about where that lamp is, right there. She turns, looks into the girls' room. She says she sees a little girl standing in front of the sink. Looked like she was looking into the mirror, even though there was no mirror there at the time. She was crying, turned and looked at my mother, and disappeared. At that point, my mom turned around to my aunt to tell her what she'd just seen, and my aunt was standing behind my mom like, because she saw the exact same thing that my mother did. Another funny little story. The first 5 years we had the school, we used to do a haunted house during Halloween. A lot of my friends and family would come up here and help put that all together and be actors and all that kind of stuff. My buddy Jimmy had come up here and he was sleeping in the red room, which is the room right on the other side of this bathroom. He was sleeping in the bed closest to the door. He got woken up at about 8:30 in the morning to hearing a bunch of noise in the girls' bathroom. So he got up out of the bed and came in here to see what was going on. He said he came in into the doorway and standing right about where you are, said he saw an older lady wearing an old looking black dress. Said she looked just as real as anybody in the room right now. Said she had her back to him like this. Said he came in, even put his hand on her shoulder, said she kind of looked back and smiled at him. He said, "You scared the hell out of me." And then went back into the bedroom over here, started telling my brother, who was sleeping in the big bed in there, how cool it was that we have this cleaning lady that comes in with the old time dress while she works. And my brother's like, "What are you talking about? We don't have any cleaning ladies or people running around here in old dresses." And when it finally clicked in his head what had actually happened to him, that RV that's outside, he went into that RV. He drank about a pot of coffee and smoked about a pack of cigarettes before he finally calmed down. This landing here, the first 2 years I lived in the building, during the winter time, this is where my bedroom was. Because this is the only side of the school that had heat at that time, because this is where all the plumbing is on this side, and had to get it heated so the pipes and stuff wouldn't break. This is what I could tell you about living over here. First of all, the most common things, like I had mentioned, you would hear the stall door shutting throughout the day. Sometimes you'll hear somebody coming up these stairs. And sometimes you get like all kinds of crazy knocking and banging going up in this stairway here that leads up to the attic. At that time, my bed would have been up against that wall. My computer would have been up against the wall over there. One night I woke up to see an older gentleman sitting in my chair staring at me as I lay in the bed. Now the weirdest thing about him is when he appeared, there was no color to him. It was like he almost appeared more like an old black and white film. It was about 2 days after that experience. I was laying in bed, I was on my laptop. I looked up from my laptop and I see again the same older gentleman standing here staring at me as I lie in the bed. Well, as you know, I'm a smoker, terrible habit, never start. So what I like to do before I go to bed is I like to go outside and have a cigarette. On this particular night, after I had my cigarette, I'm coming back in. I come around the corner down there to come up the stairs, noticing that all 4 pillows are off my bed and stacked down on the stairs this way going down. I felt like I'd gotten in trouble, like you're sleeping on the couch tonight. That's what it felt like. Fortunate enough, there was a team that came here during that same week. It was an all-female paranormal team. They divided their team in half. Half the girls came up here. The rest of us all went down to the basement. It was kind of like the boys' room situation. I'm all the way in the basement. I can hear this woman just screaming up here. Each team had a walkie-talkie. So the walkie-talkie comes to life down there, "Apparition, get your butt up here right now!" That's the PC version. So I'm running up the stairs, coming up here. When I round that corner, I see all the girls huddled on the bed, all together, like holding each other, looking terrified. I can hear the banging going on up here. I can hear the stall doors slamming and stuff. So I come up here and I'm like, what happened, Apparently, they came up here, they all sat on the bed doing an EVP session. They said at that point, a voice started coming through the walkie-talkie, answering the questions. Now you can't say it's paranormal because a walkie-talkie can be picking up a signal from somewhere else. It's definitely interesting that it was answering the questions. They said at that point, that classroom door opened by itself. They started hearing the banging and stuff up in this stairway. So one of the girls got up out of bed, opened that door to see if she could tell what was making all the noise. And at the top of those stairs, she said she saw an older gentleman staring and looking back down at her. And that's when she screamed. Now, generally speaking, this is probably the least active room in the building. Now that doesn't mean that things don't happen here. It just means that overall, it's the least active. Now, especially like the dog walkers, the bicyclers, the walkers, joggers, things that are going up, people who go up and down the street here all the time, they like to tell us things like how sometimes at night they see balls of light traveling through the classroom. Sometimes they tell us that they see a little girl looking out the window, or sometimes an older gentleman looking out the window. And my favorite one to date is how many people like to come up and tell me how much they love the little black cat that I have that sits in the window. I do not have a cat. Figure that one out. But there have been reports of people seeing a small, like little shadow that'll run through the room. People sometimes claim they feel something rubbing up against their legs or hearing meows and whatnot. So I don't know, it's all pretty weird. Probably the most interesting thing that I've ever had happen in this room was years ago. The team here did a big scavenger hunt. And after the scavenger hunt was over, the team had all gone to the room next door to add up everybody's points to see who had won the scavenger hunt. The rest of the people that participated in the scavenger hunt stayed in this room with me. I must have smelled bad or something that night because I was the only one sitting at the table. Everybody else decided to stand around in a semicircle. So I'm talking to everybody. And at that point, there was a soda can sitting on the table, which would be this actual can right here. And as I was talking to everybody, the can was about half full at the time. I noticed the can was starting to like shake a little bit at the table. My first thought was there were so many people up here, you know, kind of walking around, shifting their weight, that it was something in the floor, maybe vibrating the can. Until the can vibrated like so much that it was getting ready to tip over. So in my mind, I was like, oh, there's going to be soda everywhere. I go to reach out for the can. And what happened was the can actually stopped like right on its side, just like that, and stayed that way. Now you can make a can do that if you take enough time to try to get it to balance before to just do it on its own. And at that same moment, the K2 meter, or otherwise known as an electrical magnetic field detector, went off at the same time that this was happening. And if I can find the picture here for you, the picture itself even looks pretty bizarre. Like, let me show it to you.
Oh, wow.
Almost down here looks like it's floating, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That's cool. Wow. Oh, wow.
And I just thought it was cool because it happened in a full, a room full of people. So it was kind of interesting. Some other cool stuff in the room itself, though. One cool thing I really like historically would be this bed. This bed is about 200 years old. It used to be owned by the Stoner family. Jeff Stoner used to be like the morning DJ radio host in the morning and stuff like that here in town. It was only owned by his family, so it would have been his bed, his father's bed, his grandfather's bed, his great-grandfather's bed, so on and so forth. But what happened was his house burnt down. But for whatever reason, the bed did not burn. Even the mattress and the bedding and stuff burned, but the bed itself did not burn. Now, what's extra cool about this bed, it's what they call a rope bed. You see how it has little pegs around here? Back in the day, that's how beds were built. You actually tied rope across your bed like this, and that kind of worked like your bed spring. Okay, we've all heard the term sleep tight. That's where it comes from. Make sure your ropes are tight. And a lot of museums don't even have rope beds in this good a shape. So it's kind of a cool little piece to have donated to us. Now, there's one piece in this building that has a tendency to be a lot of people's favorites. It's not necessarily my favorite part because I'm not into that kind of stuff, but a lot of people are. Would be that dresser right there. That dresser was owned by H.H. Holmes. For those of you who are not familiar with who H.H. Holmes is, he was considered the country's first serial killer. had a hotel in the Chicago area that was later dubbed the Murder Castle. And he had this hotel built with all kinds of little secret passageways and doorways and things. And how he got it built without anybody knowing that was he would actually hire a team to come in and they would build one section of the hotel. And then he'd fire them all. And then bring in another team to build the next section of the hotel. So nobody had the whole plan or design of what things were for or how they worked. So when it was completed, he could actually like come into your room, kill you, open this trick door, drop the body, and it would go all the way down to the basement, and nobody in the hotel was any of the wiser. Now, later, after it was found out what he was doing, the hotel mysteriously burned down. I'm sure it was probably the locals. But this survived all that for one reason. It was one of the pieces of evidence used against Holmes in his murder trial. Now, why is that? Well, we all know how he liked all his little secret stuff, right? What you see here is the 3 beautiful, ornate drawers, right? Very beautiful piece. What you don't notice is the faceplate on the bottom is actually a secret drawer where he would keep like knives and things that he used to torture and murder people with. The funny part of the story, and yes, there's a funny part, is, as what often happens is at the end of things, you know how they auction off pieces of evidence and things like that. One of the officers acquired this piece, and he gave it to his wife as an anniversary present.
Oh, good.
But how it found us was when they had eventually died, the family had made the decision that they wanted to get rid of it. And luckily, one of the antique dealers we work with caught wind of it and called us up and said, "Hey, I know you guys are into this kind of stuff." And all it took was my mom looking at my stepdad and going, "Honey, I love you." And here it is. There's a lot of cool pieces out here. Like most of the pieces out here are actually Victorian. Like this was even an old Victorian buffet, so this is all handmade and hand carved, very beautiful pieces. Even the white furniture pieces down there, those are actually colonial. So those are actually older in the United States. This landing here led to what was the old nurse's office, which is my bedroom now. It's interesting about the history of the town, not just about the school itself, is way back when the school first opened and stuff like that. They only had one principal and one nurse for all 3 schools. So if a kid got sick at another school, she would either have to travel there or they would bring the kids here. So there was a lot of sick kids that were going through the area and such. The most common thing that people will experience like in this area is a lot of the times you hear the footsteps like somebody's walking around through here. A lot of times people see a shadow person in here, but they say they know it's female because they say they can see her dress flow as she's going through. Chances are you probably won't talk to her. She doesn't really talk all that much or participate in an investigation. She pretty much keeps to herself. So much the fact that it took me 2.5 years to figure out who she was. My first initial thought was nurse's office. Nurse, right? Has to be the old nurse. Well, what happened was I had the opportunity to give a tour to surviving relatives of Miss Holliday. Now, who Miss Holliday was is when the town had reached the decision that each school needed its own nurse and its own principal. Miss Holliday was the person for the job. She was the principal here. And I kid you not, I decided, well, I really don't want to talk about the ghost stuff with these people. Let's just keep it history, just because I didn't want to go there with them. But they showed up, they just pulled in the driveway. I'm walking up to the car, I'm introducing myself. This older lady's getting out of the back of the car and she looks up at the building and goes, "She's still here." And I'm like, "Why would you say that?" And she goes, "I kid you not, 'cause she never shut up about the damn place." Apparently this was like her crown jewel. I guess she spent a lot of her personal time here making sure everything was perfect. This was like her life achievement. She loved this place so much. And that's even, part of the mythology with ghosts. People want to say, well, don't they have to be murdered or die there, that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, a ghost is just a human soul that's used its free will given to it by whatever God you believe in and has chosen to remain here. And where do they go? They go to places that were important to them in life. So like in this case, after they had left, any paranormal team that came here, they started getting holiday. And their EVPs, through the spirit boxes, through obelisks, things like that, like your apps, they kept getting holiday. To the point where people would be like, well, what was the big holiday here? Did they like do a big thing for Christmas or something? And it was like, no, Miss Holiday. And my few interactions with her, I can say she's very polite. I think my favorite story with her is I was coming out of my room one night to go use the bathroom. I was the only person here at the time. I come out of the room and I just hear a, hello. Not scary. But when you're in the room, the building by yourself and you're not expecting it, you will be like, Jesus! I don't have to pee anymore. But it's really not scary. Just got to change the way you think about it. Well, since everybody's focus is on the Ouija board.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a quick little thing out there about Ouija boards. Do Ouija boards summon the devil? No. That's not how it works. But where they get their bad rep from. Okay, I'll explain how this works. Do Ouija boards work? Yes, they do. Can you communicate with a ghost with it? Yes, you can. Should you? Hell no. And here's why. A lot of people want to ask the question, well, why can you use a Ouija board or say like a voice recorder or an EMF detector? Why is that any different? Well, there's a huge difference. With a piece of equipment, that piece of equipment requires nothing from me to do what it's supposed to do. That Ouija board, to move that piece, you are giving permission to whatever is there to use you to move that piece. Okay, that's what the difference is, and why is that a problem? If it's just a ghost, not a problem at all. Now, let's say if there was something more negative at a location. All they need is permission. Once you've given permission, it's game over. So you really shouldn't use Ouija boards, and if you do, you better make sure you know what's there before you do it, because you're going to set yourself up for world of problems. And that's my 2 cents on that. I can tell you there's nothing negative here. I've lived in the building for 10 years. And one thing that I can tell you about being an investigator of my own, if you have to come to me and ask if you have a demon in your house, you do not have a demon in your house. Okay? If you have a demon in your house, you're gonna know you have a demon in your house. Okay? That's how that works. Back to the red room here. This room here is actually one of the most active rooms in the building. Once again, why is it? I have no idea. It just is. This room is important to me because it's the first room in the building I ever saw an apparition. And it would have been taking it back to the 1st September that I was here. We had finished getting electricity in the building. We had just finished the plumbing. So the next step was to try to get heat in the building before winter time so all of our new pipes didn't explode. When the gas company came out here, they said there was no way they were going to hook up gas to this building until every single window had been taken care of first. It didn't matter to them that we only wanted to heat that section of the school. They did not care. There are 62 windows in this building that need to be replaced. We're talking at a minimum of $35,000. There was no way it was going to happen. So we came up with a compromise. The compromise was a board on the outside, a board on the inside with insulation in the middle. So that's what I was working on. I was sleeping in the office one morning. My girlfriend was here in the office with me sleeping. It's about 5 in the morning. I had woken up, which is unusual because I like to sleep till noon if you let me. So I came in, I shut the door to the office, I shut the door to this room trying to keep the noise down, and I started working on the windows. I got to like this window right here when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye going by like the length of the classroom. So I turned around to get a good look at what I was seeing, and what I saw was a little girl. And when I say a little girl, I mean a little girl, because she wasn't much taller than the doorknob. She came up to the door, turned, looked right at me, reached up, grabbed the doorknob, opened the door physically opened, and she walked out of the room. That was the morning I went outside and smoked about a pack of cigarettes, just waiting for somebody to wake up so I could tell them what had just happened. Because a lot of the times, you know, if you have an experience, you might try to explain it away, like, oh, well, maybe that voice was somebody outside, or this or that. But when you see something, either you're crazy, or it really happened, or both. You know, it's totally possible too. But it's just one of those experiences you can't just write off. It kind of sticks with you. Now, when I was doing my own research on the school, which is a very tricky process. If you want to do any of your own research on the building, there's a lot of different ways you have to look up this place. It was originally First Ward. Then it changed to Irving School. So you're going to have to look it up under both names. And not only that, this wasn't always Wisconsin Rapids. It was also Grand Rapids. So you need to look it up both ways like that as well. Fortunately, the library in town has an archive of all the old newspapers and articles and things about the school. When I originally checked, there's been more articles since then, but at that time there was exactly 888 different articles on this building. So I had to start at the beginning and work my way through to present. There was one interesting article that I found from April of 1941 about a little girl that went to school here by the name of Betty Vanderhill. She's a kindergarten student, walked home from school every day. This particular day, Betty stepped off the curb. She was hit by a car. The car failed to stop and continued dragging Betty's body another 100 feet before stopping the vehicle. And by that time, Betty was dead. Now, why do I think the little girl that's here is Betty? A, she calls herself Betty. She answers to the name Betty. She matches the description, about the right age. Heartbreaking part of the story is there was one time I was in the kindergarten room with a buddy of mine, and we heard with our own ears a little girl say to us, "I only want to go home." But even in the beginning, before we even bought this place, when we were doing our own research on the school, we came across a lot of stories online about the crying little girl. People would see her in the building, they'd see her outside of the building, this crying girl, she would disappear, blah, blah, blah. Well, by coming in here, treating Betty like she's a part of the family, like she's a real little girl. Some of you might have noticed the blue bicycle down in the kindergarten room. That is here because there was a paranormal team that came here, and they captured an EVP from Betty asking for a blue bike. So you bet your butt I went out and I got one. By doing things like that, fast forward almost 10 years later, now Betty is seen as the happy little girl, the laughing little girl. She'll say hello to you when you come into the building. People will see her dancing and spinning around to music. Totally different than what she was originally, which shows just how much we can affect them as much as they can affect us. Huge difference. The room itself has some interesting pieces. Notice a lot of you are drooling over the table. The table was owned by the mobster Frankie Frado. He had this table made especially just for him. It's one of a kind. And could you imagine some of the conversations that went down here? It would be amazing. Some other interesting pieces in the building would be like these two beds over here. Have any of you heard of the Lemp Mansion? Lemp Mansion. It's another very famous haunted location in the country. These were Lemp beds. The Lemp family, way back in the day, was a big producer of alcohol. It's how the family made their fortune. When they passed prohibition and made alcohol illegal, the whole family committed suicide, single gunshot wounds to the head. They even went as far as shooting the family dog. And now the mansion is known for its hauntings. And the serial numbers are on the bed, so if you don't believe me, grab them and check them yourself. Now, a lot of people like to ask me the question, with bringing all the old stuff in here, has there anything been attached to what you bring in here? Normally, I would say no, except for that bed. For whatever reason, there's a shadow person seen around this bed quite often. A lot of people who have slept in this bed say they get messed with. had the bottoms of their feet slapped or tickled, or somebody's feeling like somebody's pushing on the bed, different experiences like that. But the weird part about it is whoever it is calls themselves Robert, which is very, very interesting because there was, in fact, a Robert Lemp. Now, I am not going to sit here and try to tell you that it's the Robert Lemp hunting this bed, because at the end of the day, we really don't know who we're talking to. Okay? The truth of the school could be there's two old bums that haunt this place, and when they see people walking up, they play paper, rock, scissors. Damn it, I got to beat Betty tonight. We really don't know who we're talking to, right? But it's definitely very, very strange. These are Lemp beds. There's something that calls itself Robert, and there was a Robert Lemp. It's definitely very bizarre. Here's where it gets weird. So buckle up, Buttercup. How many of you are familiar with Freemasons?
Yeah.
Most of you? Any of you don't know who Freemasons are? Some of you? Okay, Freemasons go way back. We're talking biblical times. Masons, people who build things. Back in the day, were slaves. So there was one group of Masons who got smart, and they only shared their secrets amongst themselves and didn't share with anybody else. And they started to become master builders. They built things that were amazing. So eventually, other kings and things wanted them to come to their lands and build things, and they actually earned their freedom, which is where the term Freemasons come from. They even built King Solomon's temple, which most of us are familiar with. A lot of secrecy about the Freemasons, a lot of speculations. Some people tie them in with the Illuminati, blah, 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 different things like that. Some people think they're part of the occult or whatever. I have no idea. I'm not a Freemason, and I'm not going to sit here and talk like I know, because I don't. Because people don't know unless you're a Freemason, right? One thing about Freemasons, first of all, they were rumored to have built a lot of the first schools in this country. Now, when Freemasons build a building, there's a few different things that they will do. First of all, they will use limestone foundations, which the school does, in fact, have a limestone foundation. And if you're into the paranormal, one of the things you will learn is one of the theories is that limestone helps to fuel paranormal activity. Because it just seems to be that most buildings with limestone foundations seem to have activity. Another thing that the Freemasons will do is they find ways to build their symbology into the architecture. If you will look at these support structures up here, you'll immediately notice that it is the square and compass symbol of the Freemasons. If you were to Google Freemasons right now, one of the first things that would pop up is the Freemason symbol. There it is, right there. Now, I had speculated for years that the Freemasons had their hands in this building. Until one day I received a letter from the Freemasons. Seal and everything right on it. It was pretty freaking cool. Asking if they could come out here. And I was like, sure, like I'm gonna say no. So they sent two gentlemen out here, an older gentleman, somebody closer to my age, and talked to me about the building. They did say that they, in fact, had built the building. Now, this is where it gets really weird. So, and I'm not even saying that I believe this. This is just what was told, take it or leave it. All right. One of the most unique things about this building is these supports. Why? When you normally construct a building, all of your support is from the ground up. That's not the case here. The supports up in this attic work like a suspension bridge. They're actually holding the floors up from the top down like this. That's a pretty amazing thing to pull off in the 1800s. They didn't have construction equipment or anything like that, hammers and saws and horses. And they pulled all this off. I mean, even look at all the angles in the roof. Even with the tools we have today to cut all of those angles and get them all to match up right, that's a pain in the butt. So this is back when it was a real skill. But anyways, what they had said to me was, do you want the red pill or the blue pill? They said that the school was built on the highest point in town deliberately. Said think of it like a focal point. Okay, like top of the pyramid type kind of thinking. Okay, so it's already a focal point in town for energy, all right? Now they said with the supports the way they are, in a normal building where you have all of your support going from the ground up, any energy that your building is taking up out of the earth is then being shot out your roof. With a support structure like this, any energy the building is pulling up out of the earth is then being recycled right back down into the building again. I don't know if I believe that, but it's definitely an interesting thought. If you want to get into other theories about what fuels paranormal activity, one theory would be natural running water. What's at the bottom of the hill that we're on? The river. Another theory is railroad tracks, the big long metal rods, all that kinetic energy. What do you got on that side of the building? You got the railroad tracks. Then, if you want to get into 1980s poltergeist movie scenario, the water tower is right over here on the corner, right? Oh, this is ready for this one, Rapids. That's where the town's first cemetery was, until 1944 when they decided to move it. And when you read the little documentation there is on the project, the person in charge of the project estimated that they removed about 85% of the occupants. Think about that for a minute. So people want to ask why the school's haunted. I can't tell you, take your pick. If you're into any of that kind of stuff, go for it, have a field day. Now, going back to the activity of the school itself, one of the biggest local legends of the school revolves around a little boy named Oscar. Now the story goes, as Oscar was a child who had mental disabilities and went to school here. That does actually kind of jive with the history, because during the World War, this is one of the first schools that actually started offering classes geared toward children with disabilities. The story continues that Oscar was being bullied by some of the boys that went to school here. The story has two different endings. One version of the story states that Oscar became very depressed and one day snuck his way up to the attic and hung himself. The other version of the story says it was the boys that were involved with bullying him, got him up here doing stupid kid stuff, and in the process somehow killed Oscar. Now, what I will say about that is, I have found no documentation anywhere to support the story of Oscar. So it has to remain a local legend. Now, that being said, there's definitely a little boy here, and he refers to himself as Oscar. And when you do get to interact with him, especially if you get to interact with Betty and Oscar at the same time, you will notice how slower Oscar is to respond to things. It's like he is challenged. It's very strange. But the weirdest thing is we had a team here. Now, on this side of the attic, they had EMF detectors. On that side of the attic, they had tri-field meters that were set for natural magnetic fields. EMF detectors generally will pick up man-made fields like from electricity and appliances and things like that. There is a difference. And whenever they asked for one of the meters to go off, they would go off. To the point it was like watching an episode of Ghost Hunters. It was that good. And what this team leader did, he was like, okay, well, I'm going to set my alarm for 10 minutes. And let's just see if during that 10 minutes the meters go off by themselves and make sure this isn't just something random or an outside source influencing whatever, blah, blah, blah. During that 10 minutes, those meters did not go off, not even once. Once the 10 minutes was off, the alarm goes off, he turns it off, and he's like, okay, since we're getting such great responses up here tonight, because immediately the meters were going off and we were asking for them again, he goes, I want to know about Oscar. We want to know if the stories are true or not. Is there something that you could do to let us know? Well, at this point, their team leader is sitting up against that bookshelf. I'm sitting on the floor up against the chimney over here. And the rest of the team is sitting around this table over here. When the lady on their team is pointing right over here and yells out, do you see that light over there? We all look, and at that moment, what we saw was, see that white plastic 5-gallon bucket right there next to the chair? At that point, it was right here. What we see is this ball of light coming in from the corner over here, goes right over the bucket, kind of went like this over the top of the bucket, and then dropped inside of the bucket. The light was so bright that you could actually see it illuminating through the bucket. The light goes out. I immediately jump up off the floor. I come over here, and in the bucket was one of our props for the haunted house. And what was it? The noose. Now, how strange is it at a time when we're asking if it could tell us if it's true or not? This thing shows up and takes us to a noose, which means one of two things. Either A, it really happened, or B, it's the whole other theory of that we haunt ourselves. Meaning, there's so many people, especially in this area, that believe in the story of Oscar, that they've actually managed to manifest that energy to be here. Quantum physics type kind of stuff. And with that, we're going to go all the way down the stairs. So this is the kitchen. So this is what they would have added in '54 for the purpose of the cafeteria. Those would be the two half doors there that they would open up, and the kids could come up and get their food, leave their dirty trays, that kind of thing. As far as activity, the most common things that will happen in here is a lot of the times, like when I'm cooking and making dinner or something, we'll get like a knock at the door, like almost like, what's up, what's for dinner type kind of thing, Another thing that happens in here quite a bit, like when myself or my mother are in here doing dishes. I've seen it a couple of times, like you'll see the rag sitting here and you'll see the rag start doing like this, like somebody's trying to pick it up, almost like they're trying to help you dry dishes or something. So that's kind of strange. But my favorite story in this area, going back to the first Christmas again that I was here, I had old Christmas music playing on the radio out there. And I was in here making dinner, and my girlfriend at the time, she was down here with me, and she brought her daughter along, who I think was like 8 or 9 at the time. And I'm sitting here and I'm cooking, and I looked out into the dining room and I saw what I thought was her daughter Heidi kind of just dancing and spinning around with music. I mean, I didn't even think anything of it. It was like a quick glance, like, oh, okay. I finished cooking, and then I yell out like, Heidi, come and get it, self-serve. My girlfriend's looking at me like, Heidi can't hear you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? She was just in the dining room. She's like, no, Heidi's been up in the office the whole time. So it was like, who did I just see dancing and spinning around to the Christmas music then? Continuing out here into the dining room. The dining room, one of the best things that works in here, just sit at the table and just talk amongst yourselves, crack some jokes, have a good time. And the reasoning behind this is you got to think of it like this. Whenever I've had a paranormal team here, I like to say, put this to the test. Divide your team in half, okay? Have one half go to one room where they do the stereotypical investigation. Are you a boy? Are you a girl? Do you know you're dead? You take the other half, put them in a room, you sit around, have a good time, crack jokes, and see which room has more activity. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the fun room. Think about it. Which room would you want to be in? Yeah. Hey, there was a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar. I want to hear the punchline. Come on. And it seems to work that way, especially in this room. You just start hanging around and having a good time, and it's like it seems to draw things in. We had one team here from Ohio, and they were sitting around the table doing just that, when they kept noticing like a shadow person at the top of the stairs. So the lady sitting at that end had her camera set up on the corner, and she kept randomly snapping pictures of the stairway. And in one of the pictures, it looks like a shadow person coming down the stairs at them, which was pretty cool. There was one night I was down here with my buddy Bowling Ball, his wife, and my adopted son Matthew. I was sitting in that chair, bowling ball was in that chair, his wife was here, and Matthew was there. And it was probably 2-ish in the morning. And we're sitting around just drinking coffee, just talking. And we started hearing these loud popping noises. We heard a pop off into the cafeteria, and we're like, oh, what was that? And then heard another pop back off this way, and we're like, whoa, there it was again. Then heard another pop, like up at the top of the stairs. Looked up at the top of the stairs, standing in the doorway, kind of like this, doing one of these, was Betty. And she shone through so clearly that you could actually see the pattern in her dress. She disappears, and we get this blast of air that comes through here. We're not talking like a breeze. We're talking like a blast of air that came through here. And it was cold air. Now this was in August. There's no air conditioning in this place. In August, it's a brick oven, okay? There's no cool breezes or anything going anywhere around here. And the crazy part about it was poor Matthew, who was sitting here, was like in the line of fire of that breeze that came through here. And for whatever reason, he started crying. And he's just like, I don't even know why I'm crying. And what a lot of times I've found in the paranormal, when something passes through you, it'll pick up like an emotional residue, I guess is the best way to explain it. Either that or he was just a really big sissy. I don't know. But even now, like even more recent activity is, you know, I like to play music on the radio when I'm down here, or I have my friends here and we're talking. Somebody must not like modern music because the volume will just go down. And it's a turn knob. You have to physically turn the knob. So we'll be sitting here listening to music. Da, 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 da. It's like, hey, I was listening to that. This was the old cafeteria / gymnasium. It was like on bad weather days, they could actually like break down the tables and chairs and push them all off to one side of the room and let the kids come in and blow off steam. The most common things that happen in this room is you'll hear the footsteps. Whoever it is doesn't pick up their feet. So it's more of a shuffle, kind of like a footstep. And a lot of the times when you hear the footsteps, it's accompanied by whistling. It's almost like somebody's down here whistling while they work, while they go about their day. Another thing that people report in the whole building, but more in the basement than anywhere else, is people will claim to have like little pebbles and things thrown at them. Well, and at first, I had never experienced it. Had a lot of people come to me saying that they experienced it, like my mom and stuff when she'd be down here. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, Mom, what were you doing before you came down here, right? Kid you not. We were getting ready for that big fundraiser that we did here years ago. And this was going to be the lecture hall, right? Had the projector and everything all set up. And it was a night that I had just got it all set up and everything roaring and ready to go. I had the projector up and running. And I decided I'm going to watch a movie. First movie I'm going to watch in this old school, Ghostbusters. Right? So I'm sitting in that purple chair right there. I'm watching Ghostbusters. Getting to the end of the movie, right? Stay Puft's walking down the street like, roar, and I'm like a little kid like, yeah. And at that point, I get hit in the head with a pebble. And I'm like, what the hell? So I get up and I'm looking, and my first thought as a ghost hunter, it's like, okay, let's try to explain this logically. Maybe something fell from the roof, right? Maybe from the sound, from the speakers, maybe it shook a piece of the tile off or something like that. So I get up out of my chair and I'm looking and I don't see anything. When enters pebble number 2. And it came from that direction, and I know it came from that direction because when the pebble came in and hit the floor, I could hear it bouncing off the metal legs of the chairs as it came in at me. And I'm sitting here thinking, how many people can say they had a paranormal experience while watching Ghostbusters, right? Another thing that happens in this room a lot is people will experience flashes of light. And the only way that I can explain it, it's like a camera flash going off, but with no point of origin. Meaning it's just like the whole room just pops with light. It's the only way I can explain it. If any of you saw the episode of My Ghost Story on A&E Bio Channel, where they did an episode about the school, one of the pictures that they showed in that episode was of a shadow person. Now let me set up what was happening that day. me and my mother were down here, and we had just cleaned up the basement. We were sweeping the floor and whatnot. I was somewhere like right over here. My mom was over about where those speakers are right now. When my mother claimed she could feel somebody touching her shoulder. So she asked me real quick, she's like, do you have your phone on you? I'm like, yes. She's like, quick, take a picture. I took a picture, and that's what came out in the photograph.
How cool.
Send me that too.
Now, for the non-believers, the one thing that I want to point out here is a lot of people instantly want to try to debunk it. They'll say things like, oh, it was somebody standing in the way of the camera flash creating shadow. Okay, this picture was taken 10 years ago on an Apple iPhone 3. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that meant they didn't have camera flashes on them yet, or the flashlights back then at that point. Okay, so it was not a camera flash. So then a lot of people will say, well, then it must have been somebody blocking out the light in the room, casting a shadow in that direction. Can you tell me which direction shadows cast in this room? This way. Definitely not that way. And lastly, if it was a shadow created by a real person, then riddle me this. If that was a real shadow cast by a person, why do you see shadow here? If it was a real shadow cast by a person, you'd see it here on the wall, but you wouldn't see it here. It would just disappear right back that way. So if you can make a shadow do that, you let me know how, okay? This is the creepy side of the basement.
Yeah.
This
I told you guys I wouldn't go in.
Yeah.
This side of the basement was the caretaker's. Everything the caretaker needed to run this building was on this side. This is where all his storage areas, workbenches, this is where the coal furnaces were, the coal room, etc., etc. So this would have been the caretaker's space. Now, a lot of people, or a question that was asked earlier, do you believe like in different types of ghosts, things like that? Well, one thing that I will say about ghosts is you are exactly the person you were in life as you are in death. Meaning, if you're a sweet little old lady and you become a ghost, you're going to be a sweet little old lady ghost. If you're a jerk and you become a ghost, do the math. Okay? So a lot of people that want to come in here and say, oh my God, it's an evil spirit, he uses curse words, he's mean to women, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, he's just kind of a jerk. I very lovingly call him the crabby old man, because that's basically what he is. Now, as far as him messing with the ladies, he only seems to mess with the ladies when they're on this side of the basement. He won't mess with them anywhere else in the building. So, what do I really think that's about? Think of the time period. It was a man's world. This is where the manly things happened. And I don't think he likes it when women come into the man's space. Especially if you're a loud, aggressive, assertive type kind of woman, then he really guns for you. This room right behind me is a little storage room. It's underneath the main stairs that you all came into. There's been a few experiences in here. Everything from, I've captured a little girl laughing on a few different occasions. I have two favorite experiences in here. One would have been, we had some friends of ours, they were husband and wife, and they were here staying with us. And they wanted to, investigate the building that night. And the lady, I have no nice words to say. All night she was walking through the building basically saying, oh, this is a lie, I haven't heard anything, I haven't seen anything, blah, 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 blah. So it got to the point of the night they wanted to come down here. Well, I decided I need a break from these people. So I grabbed my son Matt and I was like, you go down in the basement with him. I'm going out back where my mom and my uncle were having a fire. And I'm going to relax for a bit. So I'm out by the fire for maybe 30 minutes. And Matthew comes running out to the fire pit, just white as a ghost, and he's shaking and he's got his voice recorder in his hand. And I'm just like, Matthew, what happened? He's like, you gotta hear this. And he like hits play on the voice recorder, and you can hear them all in the room talking. And then you can hear him mention how cold the room just got. So you're just like, wow, it just got really cold in here. And you can hear Matthew like, well, hey, Mike, if that's you, would you do something to let us know? And then real loud, you just hear like this in the room, and you can just hear everybody losing their minds. Like, oh my God, just yelling and screaming. Matthew running out to the fire pit. When he heard it the second time on the voice recorder, he threw the voice recorder, about threw it in the fire. So at this point, I'm like, Matthew, where are they? Oh, I left them inside. You just left them inside, right? So I'm running inside to check on them, right? Well, at this point, the woman who was saying stuff all night now is so terrified. Husband is talking to her very calmly, leading her out of the building very slowly. They reach the front door. She runs, jumps in their truck, locked the truck doors, wouldn't even let her husband back into the truck, and she sat there and cried for over an hour. That's what you get. Another experience that happened in this room, and I'm going to tell this story because it's my one rule here. While you're investigating, no provoking. What I mean by that is when you see on certain shows where these individuals will go into a place and say, you dirty, rotten liar, or whatever, yelling obscenities at these spirits, trying to provoke them into doing something. Don't do that. A, it's rude. It's disrespectful. I wouldn't come into your home and start yelling at you that way. And also, if you make something upset, guess what? You get to go home. I don't. Then I'm left here dealing with who's ever pissed off that night, okay? Don't do that. And that's exactly what happened in here one night. There's a family that I'm really close friends with, and they've come out and hung out with me a few times. And the grandma was in here with the grandson and stuff. And that's exactly what she decided to do. She was yelling, oh, you're just a piece of garbage, blah, 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 putting it nicely. And sure enough, you just see her come flying out of that chair, like face first into the concrete, had red marks all around her neck. Her expensive equipment that she had sitting on her lap was all over the concrete floor. It was around about Christmas time, so when they were trying to leave the basement, going up the stairs here, I keep my Christmas tree right up there. The Christmas ornaments were coming off the tree, were being thrown at them as they were coming up the stairs. Don't provoke. Don't do it. I have seen guys bigger than me will cry like a baby when they get hit or pushed by something that they can't fight back. Okay? Don't do it. Right here where you see this pencil mark on the wall. What happened here? When we were in the process of purchasing the building and we were doing the final walkthrough with the real estate agent, her name is Mary, still friends with her today, an amazing lady. I was up ahead in the room up there. Mary was walking through here. She had her clipboard, had it to her chest, just like this, was walking through here, and when she got to this spot, I just saw her like into the wall. Oh, careful. So, at that point as I yelled out, I was like, Mary, are you okay? And she was like, no, I'm not okay. Somebody just pushed me. And to this day, she claims that somebody pushed her up against the wall. And whenever she comes over for a visit anymore, she will not come down here. But I want you to remember this spot in the location of this air duct because it plays into the next part. This is the old coal room. This is where they stored the coal for the coal furnaces. That would have been the coal chute right up there. And when we bought this place, there was still coal in here.
Yes.
If you do, I don't know if any of you brought any EMF detectors. But if you did, I cannot guarantee what kind of EMF you're going to get in here. Sometimes the EMF is so high, you're not even going to be able to use your meters because they're just going to be topped out the whole time. Sometimes there's no EMF in this room. And sometimes it comes in like a wave. Like you'll just see the needles all rise and then drop. And then all rise and then drop. No explanation for it. It's just the way it is. I don't know how it's going to be from any day to the next. I happen to be friends with a lady by the name of Tiffany Johnson. If you're not familiar with her, she is a world-renowned psychic. She's been on shows like A&E's Psychic Kids. She's been on the Learning Channel's Ghost Intervention. She does a lot of stuff up in Minnesota with radio and things like that. She's like one of my best friends in the whole world. And when we bought the school, she came out and did a little walkthrough and just gave us what her impressions were about the building. Now, I don't take what a psychic tells me as being the gospel. I take it with a grain of salt. I keep it in the back of my mind, but I don't let it influence my decisions. One of the things that she said when she entered this room, because this is probably the most active room in the building, she said the reason behind that is because there's a portal in this room, and it's where all the spirits are coming and going from that are in the school, and that's why this room is so active. One thing I will say is, in all my years of ghost hunting, I don't know that I've ever collected enough evidence to support the theories of portals or vortexes or any of that kind of stuff. But here's what I can tell you. Taking it back to the first Halloween that we were here, and we had the haunted house. After the haunted house was over, we were doing a sweep of the building to make sure that everybody was out, there was nobody hiding anywhere, that kind of thing. My mom chose to come check the basement. She said she entered the coal room. First thing she noticed was all the candy wrappers on the floor left by all the nice people. And she bent over and was picking up the candy wrappers. And she said when she stood back up again, she felt two hands slam against her chest and pushed and held her up against the wall right there. She said it was probably for only about 5 seconds, but she said to her it felt for more like 5 minutes. And that's when she ran out of the basement, screaming, and we're all like, what happened? She told us what happened. It's Halloween night. We're a crazy ghost hunting family. So we're like, all right, Mom got messed with in the basement. We're going down there. So we all come down into the room. At this point, it was me, my mom, my Aunt Susie, and my cousin Paige. My mom and my aunt were sitting in that corner over there, and me and my cousin Paige were sitting on the floor over here. We had 3 EMF detectors in the room. One was in the doorway, one was in the middle of the room, and one was in the corner over here. After about 30 minutes of investigating and not having anything happen, all of a sudden, one right after the other, the meters came on, like right into that corner. Almost like something had ran into the room and went straight for that corner, and we all heard with our own voice, our own ears, a deep male voice that said, "Fudge!" Use your imagination. But at that point, my aunt had jumped into my mom's lap. My cousin Paige was like strangling, holding on to me. And I like to tell that story because taking it to that spot, everybody wants to automatically assume that something is negative or a demon, it's swearing, it's cursing, it's mean to women. Let's try to attach a human explanation to this story, okay? The caretaker is already aggravated if you have a large amount of people in the building, especially if they're disrespecting the building, aka like the rappers and things. So you already had the guy, he's already aggravated and frustrated, right? He's like, screw it, I'm done with the night, I'm going to my room. Comes down to his room, there's people in it, and he's like, fudge! Sometimes there's a very human explanation. You don't have to go straight to that negative. For people who think there's a demon here, I've lived in the building for 10 years. Trust me, if there was a demon here, I would know it. But anyways, continuing the story, we had a team here. They did a 2-night investigation, Friday and Saturday. That Friday night when they came here, they kept getting the name Aaron. So at the end of Friday night, before they left, they were talking to me, and they were like, well, who is Aaron? And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, well, we kept getting it like through our spirit boxes and our obelisks and blah, blah, blah. We got it about 12 times. And I'm like, just because you got it 12 times still doesn't make me know who it is. I'm sorry. So when they came back that Saturday night, one of their investigators had noticed at that time I had a Frankenstein statue sitting right over there, and that this hat was on top of his head. Aaron. Now this is when things really started to come together for me. I was like, where did the real estate agent get pushed?
Right on the other side.
And it's like, where did my mother get pushed?
Right here.
And now we've got the name Aaron going right here. So I did this cute little experiment. I ran outside. I totally cut power to the building. Came back inside with our EMF detectors on that end of the wall, 0. That end of the wall, 0. Right there, 8 milligauss. That's a pretty high signal to get when there's no electricity in the building at all. They also had a thermal imager. They took a picture of the wall, and for whatever reason, that section of the wall was 10 degrees cooler. Another thing that investigators have noticed, usually if they leave their equipment up against that wall, they'll have better results. We've even had things happen where I have one of the original obelisks. We used to call it the football because it's a big oval, big clunky thing. They're not small like they are now. And we had one on the floor over there up against the wall, and it came away from the wall like somebody kicked it, like it just spun away from the wall, like whoosh, which was pretty strange. Then the other thing that we had happen in here that still blows my mind to this day, they were filming a movie here called Haunted State. And this film crew went around to different historical buildings throughout Wisconsin that are supposedly haunted, and 3 locations made it into the movie. This was one of them. When they were here investigating, we were in the cold room. Film camera guys standing right here in the doorway filming all of us investigating the room. First thing that happened is we kept noticing the camera guy kept looking behind him going. And he looked back at the camera, and he looked back behind him again, and then he looked at the camera, to the point where he finally stopped. We're like, cut. Dude, what's going on? The camera guy's like, I keep swearing to God I see somebody walking around back here. And at that point, the EMF detector on the floor next to him went off, and the spirit box sitting on the floor goes, I like him. And that's when the camera guy was like, can we please go back to the hotel now? I want to go. But what was really weird after that was they had a spirit box and an obelisk on the floor running together at the same time. Now, if you're not familiar with those 2 pieces of equipment, like I mentioned, the spirit box generates voice through radio frequency. An obelisk generates voice through EMF. Similar devices that just work off of different things. First thing what happened was the spirit box shouted out the name Ray. Right after that, the obelisk jumped in and said Bradbury. We're all sitting in the room like, Ray Bradbury? What the hell does he have to do with anything about this place, right? Couldn't figure it out. Made no sense, right? 3 days later is when Ray Bradbury died. Can't explain it. Even the producer of the movie called me up like, what is that? It's like, I don't know, but if it says my name, I'm going to make sure my stuff's together, okay? Right? But the sad part about it was they didn't put it in the film because they didn't think anybody would believe that it was filmed 3 days before he died. But it was definitely a very cool experience. This room is where the caretaker's workbenches would have been originally. I just put up some makeshift benches not that long ago, which actually has seemed to help a lot. It seems to have calmed the caretaker down just a little bit. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to put whole workbenches back in over there for him. But I could sum up this room with one story. I am friends with a gentleman by the name of Joe Kudo. If you're not familiar who he is, he does a radio show and a YouTube show now called The Skeptical Edge. He's actually a non-believer. But, interestingly enough, me and him can sit down and have intelligent conversations with differences of opinion, and we still like each other. Imagine that. Wow. Anyways, he contacted me and he's like, I want to come out and check out your school. And I'm like, sure, come on out. So he came out here with two young ladies, and I'm giving them the tour. Now, one of the common things that'll happen in this area is a lot of people will see a shadow person over here, and it'll dart down that hallway, which leads back to the dining room. We came through that doorway right there. Instantly, that's what we saw. We saw that shadow person right there, shot down the hallway. Within minutes, Joe had himself talked out of it. He was like, oh, it just must be my eyes getting adjusted to the light down here, you know, a trick of light, something like that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not going to tell you what you saw or didn't see. To each his own. So later that night, we came down here and we were investigating in this area. Now, we started getting knocks when we were asking for them. So it started off like, hey, if you're down here, would you knock and let us know? Got a knock. So I was like, okay, just to make sure that this is who we're talking to, he's like, give us 2 knocks. Got 2 knocks. And I was like, okay, last time, I hate asking these kinds of questions repeatedly, but I'm just trying to make sure that this is actually you. Would you give us 3 knocks? 3 knocks. Well, Joe Kudo, being the guy that he is, he instantly was just like, oh, well, you know, it must be the building settling, you know, air, you know, noise traveling through the air ducts, that kind of thing, you know. And I'm like, okay, you know, whatever, let's take a break. So we took a break, went outside for a little bit, and then we came back down here. At this point, I was sitting here. Joe was off in that corner. The 2 young ladies were sitting across from me. And I was just started talking. I was like, you know, thank you for talking to us earlier. We really appreciate it, you know, but we took a little break and we're back now. And at that point, we hear this deep male voice go, hello. Now, honest to God, I thought it was Joe. He's got that deep kind of radio announcer voice, you know, so I just thought, you know, he was chiming into what I was saying because I said, hey, we took a break, now we're back. So I just thought it was him saying hello. So I continued talking when the 2 ladies across from me are like, didn't you hear that? And I just went, Joe, that wasn't you? And from that corner over there, you could just hear Joe like, oh my God, you but bleep, 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 okay? Because we were the only 2 guys here and neither one of us said it. And it was a deep male voice that said hello. And every voice recorder in here from the coal room to the dining room picked it up. Well, that night, Joe left being a believer. He calls me up like 2 months later. He's like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, not much, man, what's up? He's like, hey, remember I came out to your place and did that investigation? I was like, yeah, it was a lot of fun. He goes, yeah, it was. He's like, remember that hello we got in the basement? And I was like, dude, that was so awesome. He's like, yeah, just, where'd you guys hide the speakers? There are some people that no matter what you do, they're not going to believe you. But the one thing I can tell you is I wouldn't set up fake stuff like that here because somebody would eventually find it and then I would be ruined. I picked this place because I love it, I'm trying to save it, and I've had some great experiences here. So for like the naysayers that want to say I'm running a money-making scheme here, first of all, you don't know how much it costs to fix an old building like this, let alone to run an old building like this. And not to be disrespectful, because I love the town, the people here have been very nice to me. But if I was going to run a money-making scheme, why the hell did I pick Wisconsin Rapids? Just saying. I picked this place because I love this building, and I want to share it with everybody else. Okay? That's the long short of it. And the last thing that I have to show you guys is the coal furnaces.
Yes.
These were the old coal furnaces.
Wow, those are awesome. Oh my God.
These things were built. I could tell you, if I clean these things up, I could probably still use these suckers.
Oh my God. So cool.
Yes, they're very cool, and they're very large. Like, here's the shovel right here that they used.
Oh man.
That shovel is 6 foot. I'm about 6'2". Just one of these furnaces about eats that shovel.
Wow.
Yeah, you could fit a body in there. Ever see smoke coming out my chimney? But one thing that's extra cool about these furnaces, especially if you're kind of into history, which if you want to get into ghost hunting, you kind of need to kind of like history just a little bit. These are American foundry furnaces. What does that mean?
That they were made here.
Well, not only that, but back in
They
the
were
day,
made in England,
American
weren't they?
foundry furnaces were sought after because they were known for making very beautiful, ornate furnaces. There was a problem. During the World War, they got into a contract with the Navy to design the boilers for the new naval vessels we were building. Their engineers didn't factor in the differences of using fresh and salt water, which led to some explosions, which hurt some of our own boys. And back then, when people actually supported our troops, that company went under like overnight. So to have two American foundry furnaces in one place, that is extra awesome. But as far as like paranormal activity, there really has not been much in this room at all. Like every once in a blue moon, and I mean like once in a blue moon, you'll get the sound in here. It sounds almost like that shovel hitting the concrete, like somebody shoveling coal into the room. But that is very, very rare. And the only other thing that I can think of that's happened in this area is somebody had a thermal imager down here one time, and they actually caught the thermal image like somebody walking out of the room. But other than that, this room is generally quiet as a mouse.
Alright,
Yeah, you were going.
I'll lay in it, but somebody else has to do the talking. Do I have to cover up, or just lay on top of it? Alright, I gotta take my shoes off, cause that's, I can't.
Doing somebody's. Yeah.
Okay. I was looking out the window and I heard a laugh, so I couldn't tell if it was you or not.
See it,
This is kinda neat in here.
and then it just disappears. I can just keep doing circles.
It's like you're in your own little tunnel.
Yeah.
It's kinda cool.
Somebody in here. Would you show us? You want to knock on something?
Knock on the wall.
It's the ghost of Christmas past. James.
I hope that's them.
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna go write my name on the chalkboard.
Oh.
If there's chalk. No? There was chalk? Oh yeah, here's chalk. So this is my name. You write your name?
Alright, this is my name. Do we say hello?
You could. It's very quiet in here.
I'm just seeing those wolves out of the corner of the eye. It's
You keep
driving me
seeing them?
crazy.
I'm not seeing anything at all.
Said you're seeing orbs?
That's what
I
she's
feel
saying.
like it out of the corner of my eye. I'm seeing
She's been saying that since we walked in here. She keeps seeing
this.
lights.
Yeah, this room.
Lights. So there's a lot of talking, maybe. They just need it quiet for a little bit. You know? I do hear talking, but I don't know if that's other people.
I think they went up to the attic.
Huh?
I think they went up to the attic.
Did somebody just say hello? Up to you. Can you make a noise? I keep looking at that coal chute, like waiting for something to come flying out of there. That must go outside, huh? I would imagine.
You can go all the way around that way.
Oh, back to the dining room. Yeah.
Sure you don't want to sit in that space with the...
No, no, I do not. I am not that brave.
We're coming through, sir. We're gonna trip.
I don't know if I could sit in that little room. It's
No.
too claustrophobic.
You can't.
Did you look in there? It's tiny.
I looked in there before. What's for lunch today?
Isn't this the movie room?
I have nacho chips. It used to be the cafeteria though. Because those are the cafeteria windows.
Oh yeah.
Anybody down here?
What did he?
Anybody around? You want to come have a conversation? This is my friend Jenny. Come talk to her. Come throw things at her, will ya?
How do you say that word? I don't know.
Tigos. Tigos.